This is the City of God podcast, where Christ meets culture. And welcome to the City of God podcast, where we are weekly talking about today's biggest cultural issues, all through the lens of God's infallible word. My name is Rob Pacienza, and as always, joined by my co-host, John Rabe. John, great to see you today.
Great to see you, Rob. It just keeps getting better on this podcast, and I am super excited about what we're doing today.
Yeah, we have a very special guest. She is a former competitive swimmer, a 12-time NCAA All-American, and a 5-time SEC champion swimmer. She's an advocate for the preservation of women's sports, something that is a hot topic today, certainly, in single-sex spaces. She leads the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute. So any guesses of who our special guest is today? It's none other than Riley Gaines. Riley, so good to have you on the City of God podcast.
Well, thank you, Pastor Rob and John, for having me on. Really, I could not be more excited. So thank you guys for again, having me on, but really for everything that you do.
Did I mess up anything in your bio? It's a long one, all of your accomplishments. Did I get that right?
No, that is so much kinder than a lot of the things I have to read and hear about myself. So it was perfect.
Yeah, my bio is a lot shorter, so we don't have any problem with that. We wanted to get it right.
Well, that's, yeah, it really is. I've accomplished some things in my athletic career that I'll forever be proud of. And so you certainly hit the nail on the head. So thank you.
Well, Riley, let's jump right into it. You famously, or maybe infamously, competed against a biological male who goes by the name Leah Thomas in 2022 in the NCAA Women's Swimming Championship. You tied with Thomas. But Thomas got the trophy for quote unquote photo purposes. Explain a little bit about that scenario, what happened that day, and kind of how that led to you becoming an advocate for what you now stand for in this cultural moment.
Absolutely. I was a collegiate swimmer. Really, I swam my whole life. Like most collegiate athletes do. So started swimming when I was 4 years old, graduated when I was 22. So, really dedicated 18 years of my life to my sport. Went off to college. I went to University of Kentucky, where I very proudly, as said, was a 12-time All-American, 5-time SEC champion, SEC record holder in the 200 butterfly, making me one of the fastest Americans of all time. 2-time Olympic trial qualifier, SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year, SEC Community Service Leader of the Year. But again, just to reiterate, it's a lifelong journey to get to that point, to compete at and ultimately be successful at the highest level. My junior year, I ended up placing 7th in the nation, which I was proud of. You're top 8, you're an All-American. It's a pretty high honor, but I knew I was capable of more. And so it was right then and there that I placed 7th my junior year that I set a goal for my senior year to win a national title, which would, of course, mean becoming the fastest woman in the country in my respective event. About midway through my senior year, I was right on pace to achieve this goal. I was ranked 3rd in the nation, trailing the girl in 2nd by a few 100ths of a second, a girl I knew very well. But the swimmer who was leading the nation, by body lengths, might I add, was a swimmer that none of us had ever heard of before. And this is the first time we became aware of a swimmer named Leah Thomas. I didn't know who this person was. I hadn't seen a photo of this person, or else things probably would have been a little more clear. But turns out an article was released disclosing that Leah Thomas is actually Will Thomas and swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania before deciding to switch to the women's team. I honestly, when I heard this, it was kind of like this sense of relief, like, oh, well, duh, that makes sense. And I thought the NCAA would see it how I saw it, and how my parents saw it, and how my coaches saw it, and how my family saw it, and how anyone with any amount of brain activity would probably comprehend this. But lo and behold, they did not. They saw absolutely nothing wrong with this. And so about 3 weeks before our national championships in March of 2022, they announced that Thomas's participation in the women's category was a non-negotiable, indicating, of course, there was nothing that we could do about it as female athletes, no questions that we could ask or concerns that we could raise. We were told we had to accept this with a smile on our face. And so that first day of competition was the 500 freestyle, which Thomas swam to a national title in, beating out, again, Olympians, American record holders, the most impressive female swimmers this world has ever seen. And he beat them by body lengths. Next day of competition was the day that he and I raced against each other in the 200 free, which ultimately resulted in a tie, meaning we went the exact same time down to the 100th of a second, which one is incredibly embarrassing for a 6'4" man, but two, it's pretty rare when you're racing for a minute and 40 seconds and not even 1/100th separated us.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that's not divine intervention. But anyways, we got out of the water. We go behind the awards podium where the NCAA official looks at both Thomas and myself. Again, Thomas towering over me. And the official says, "Great job, you two, but you tied. And we only have one trophy. So we're going to give the trophy to Leah. Sorry, Riley, you don't get one." And when I asked the dreaded question of why, really the question no one dared ask all season, they didn't have an answer. The NCAA hadn't given them a script of what to say when someone asked why. And so I actually appreciate his honesty. And understand, he looked sad when he said this. I could tell he didn't even believe what he was about to say. But he said, "Riley, I'm sorry. We've been advised as an organization that when photos are being taken, it's crucial that the trophy's in Leah's hands. Leah takes the trophy home. You go home empty-handed. End of story." That's the moment when, again, the unfair competition, on top of the locker room aspect, on top of the silencing that we were facing from our universities, all of these things compiled, and that is the moment when, honestly, I felt responsible, I felt guilty, I felt compelled to say something, because for so long I waited for someone else to. I knew it was wrong, my teammates knew it was wrong, again, we all knew it was unfair and wrong. My opinion was certainly the general consensus of how we all felt on that pool day. But no one was willing to say it out loud. And that is the moment when I decided I was going to.
And, you know, it's absurd that this even has to be an argument and that you have to become a lightning rod for speaking out on this issue. But you've testified about this even before Congress, and lest there be any misunderstanding, again, this is something that 10 years ago wouldn't even be a discussion. But let's just make it obvious that a male body on the average, has a tremendous advantage over the female body in an athletic competition. That's the very reason we have Title IX. That's the very reason women's sports were created as a separate category. Tell me, and it's, as you said, again, it's remarkable and divine providence that you tied him, but what is the advantage, for those who are like, trans women are women. There's no difference. Well, there's certainly a difference. There's a visual difference. There's a performance difference, et cetera, et cetera. But what is that difference? How does that translate into athletics?
Gosh, anyone with a brother knows this. Men are, of course, let's just look at swimming, for example. The men are taller. Their feet are bigger, which plays a huge difference. Their limbs are longer. These are just physical things we're talking about here. Of course, their muscular structure is different. But even things, again, in swimming that matter, your lung capacity is different. The size of your heart is different. Even something as silly as, it sounds silly, men have on average a 40% larger throat than women. That plays a huge factor of success when you're playing a sport where you're desperately grasping for air, and all of the oxygen you can get, you utilize. So all of these things, and we hear all the time, right? Well, hormone replacement therapy, HRT, or hormone suppressants, they level the playing field. HRT doesn't change the size of your throat. It doesn't change the size of your lungs. It cannot reverse puberty. And even if these males were taking these drugs, puberty blockers, before puberty, it will never mitigate male advantage. Even if a male had 0 nanomoles per liter of testosterone, male advantage would not be entirely diminished. And that being said, women aren't just a testosterone level. That should not be what the threshold is to become a woman, which is unfortunately, that's the standard that a lot of larger governing bodies are putting in place. It's 5 nanomoles per liter of testosterone and you can compete with the women. Again, that is discriminatory. It is harmful. It is deeply regressive. It's so funny to me. They do this under the guise of progress, as if we're moving in the positive forward direction. But this is taking us back in time. I mean, at least half a century, 52 years since Title IX's implementation.
Well, it shows the ignorance of our culture right now. That the fact that the feminist movement is linking arms with the transgender movement is, I can't even wrap my mind around this, because it goes against everything the feminist movement has fought for so many decades. But I think the one thing we're beginning to see is the one thing they all can agree on is they're against the Judeo-Christian worldview and against God's design for gender and sexuality. So that means more to them than anything they have fought for in separate camps over the last few decades, to join forces against individuals like yourself that are actually standing up for truth. And that really leads me to my next question, Riley. You became one of the first people to stand up and speak out against the unfairness of transgender women competing in women's sports. And you could have easily just kind of gone through that experience in 2022 and just kind of gone on into your private life. But you've decided to take a stand. And I've been to conferences with you. You have security with you. You've been smeared and shamed on mainstream media and social media. Why did you choose to speak up and to take a stand, even though you knew the hits that you would take for it?
You're so right. It honestly, after college, I was in dental school, preparing to be a dentist, set to specialize in endodontics, weirdly enough, which is root canals. I had gotten married in my senior year of college. It would have been really safe. It would have been really easy, really secure for me to essentially ride off into the sunset with the plans that I had made for myself. But I realized that the quickest way to make God laugh in your face is to make plans for yourself. And he has proven that to be true every day over these past 2 years. So really why I do it, a couple reasons. One, yes, I'm standing for objective truth. I mean, that's easy to understand, standing for biological reality, but more importantly, standing for biblical truth. God is very clear when he says he created male and female intentionally and perfectly in his image. So that makes it easy to take the stand that I've taken. I'm fighting this fight for people like my younger sister. Look, she's 15 years old. She's an elite level gymnast. I come from a family of athletes. And she will probably be the best of all of us. And I would never, ever tell her that, but it's true. That's why I fight. Like I said, been married it'll be 2 years next month. I can only hope to have a daughter of my own one day. I could not fathom looking at myself in the mirror, experiencing what we experienced, seeing what we saw, and not fighting for her. That's what this is about. It's not about me. It's not about trying to climb some sort of ladder in the political sphere or trying to be some sort of influencer. I would happily, if all of this was solved and fixed tomorrow, I would happily go back to dental school. This isn't a fight that I want to take on. It's not a fight that should be necessary to take on, but it is necessary, and I would argue that it's urgent. Certainly trusting God's direction, trusting his guidance. And I that's something I've really had to lean into and learn how to do, because it's hard. It's hard to give up control, seemingly, of your life. And again, the plans that you make. But again, worth it 10 out of 10 times.
Amen. And as the old saying goes, I am neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but it's very clear to me that God put you specifically in that position to be a co-champion, essentially, who has it taken away in order to stand up on this issue. Because I don't know that there are many people in any field of endeavor who could stand up and face what you're facing and really do it with a smile and do it with a sense of determination and even humor and joy in it. I just think it's remarkable to see. Now you're part of a lawsuit that includes more than a dozen college athletes filed against the NCAA for violating Title IX. We just had some new rules come down from the Biden administration regarding Title IX. They are supposedly leaving athletics off the table for the moment, but the status quo is already what we've seen it to be when it regards to Title IX. How did that lawsuit come to be, and what is it specifically that you are alleging that you were bringing forward in that lawsuit?
Gosh, yeah, Title IX and its original implementation, it was only 37 words, a 37-word piece of legislation that ultimately prevented discrimination on the basis of sex. Of course, one word being activity, which gave Title IX what it's most notable for, which is the equal opportunity in sports.
Athletics, yep.
Yeah. The Biden administration, the NCAA, what they've done is explicitly violate Title IX. And we were directly discriminated against on the basis of our sex, as Title IX stood at the time. To me, right, of course, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an attorney, but to me, even in the moment, I'm like, wait, this is everything that Title IX was passed to prevent from happening. Why doesn't someone sue them? And I kept thinking that, and then finally, it was like God tapping on your shoulder, and he's like, hey, it's you. You sue them. And so myself and 15 other athletes now have signed on to this lawsuit, 15 other athletes who have been adversely impacted at the hands of the NCAA due to their transgender policies. So we're super hopeful. We're super confident that this will be successful. I believe, honestly, I think the NCAA wants our lawsuit to be successful. They know this is wrong. There's no doubt about that. But for so long, they've had to say, look, our hands are tied. This gives them a way to ultimately do the right thing in their true cowardly fashion. But to your point about the Biden administration's new rewrite of Title IX, they took this 37-word piece of legislation, again, enacted 52 years ago, and created a proposal that is 1,577 pages long. Ultimately, there's a lot of fluff in there, obviously, but ultimately equating sex with gender identity in law. Again, this is so much more harmful to women than just women's sports. It means women could take academic and athletic scholarships. It means men will be housed in dorm rooms with women. It means men would have full access to bathrooms, locker rooms, changing spaces on college campuses. It means that your speech would be compelled under this new rewrite. So, for example, all students, all faculty members, professors will be forced to use preferred pronouns. And if you don't, or if you, a 17-year-old girl who's randomly, you go off to college for the first time away from your family, if you, as a 17-year-old girl who's housed in a dorm room with a male, you feel uncomfortable about this and you go to your administration and complain, you are now guilty and charged with sexual harassment. That's what the Biden administration, that's the message that they're trying to send. No, not the man who's parading around your locker room. President Biden multiple times has said these are some of the bravest people he knows. He calls that inspiring behavior. He says it's stunning. But you calling a spade is grounds for sexual harassment. So again, this policy, it's the most anti-woman, anti-reality pursuit we have seen from this administration thus far. And that's saying a lot.
Riley, I know there's some immediate outcomes from this lawsuit that you're hoping for that you've just mentioned, but speak to our audience about the long-term outcomes. What are you hoping for long-term that would come out of this lawsuit and what it would mean for Title IX and what it would mean for women and women's sports in our nation for generations to come.
Well, that's exactly why we're doing this. The women who came before me, who fought relentlessly, really not that long ago either, so I could have the opportunities that I was so fortunate to benefit from. Playing collegiate sports, playing sports in general, it changed my life. It gave me the leadership. I credit so much of my leadership skills that ultimately are playing out in my life daily now to playing sports. How to be resilient, how to set goals and work to achieve those goals. All of those things I credit to playing sports. And right now, we're denying girls of that. We want the NCAA to take accountability and responsibility, which they have avoided those things, that's for sure. That's what we're looking for here. It's very simple. Really what we're asking for, Pastor Rob, is the bare minimum. We are asking for equal opportunity. We are asking for privacy in areas of undressing. We are asking for safety in our sports, which I was naively believed that those people in the position to provide those things would do just that, right? Our coaches, our administrators, our athletic directors, people within the NCAA. But again, they failed on every account of those things. That's what this is about. We saw the NAIA, which is another national collegiate governing body, just in recent weeks vote overwhelmingly in support of preventing males from competing in women's sports. The vote was 25-0, which set a wonderful precedent for the NCAA. Hopefully they can model that of what the NAIA has now done, which was great news for our lawsuit as well. So hopefully there's a lot of pressure on them. There is a lot of pressure on them to do what is right, what is fair, what is just, and what is moral.
Riley, I want to ask you a little bit about the personal aspect of all of this. I alluded to it before, but that I think that God has put you in this position. You did not ask for this battle, and that's something that people need to be reminded of. You were plying your craft as a swimmer, a pursuit that you've undertaken since you were a child, where hundredths of a second matter, shaving off every little bit, this single-minded dedication to this sport. And then you're faced with this situation that was not of your making, and you could have retreated from that. You decided to stand up. But most of us will never experience what you've experienced, where, aside from maybe Michael Phelps, there are not many swimmers who are household names in America. You've become one because of this. There's a lot of glare and a lot of heat that comes with that. You've taken a lot of brickbats. You've been, a senator, a congresswoman essentially called you a bigot in a congressional hearing. How have you dealt with all of the hatred, the hostility, the animus that has been directed towards you through social media, through regular media, I'm sure sometimes on the street and elsewhere? How have you dealt with that?
Easily, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I was under this notion that there were not many people who shared my viewpoint. That's what we were told. We were told that, you'll never get a job, you'll lose all your friends, you'll lose your scholarship, you won't get into grad school. We had to go to sensitivity training to learn how to be kind and how to be inclusive and all these different things. And so I very much believed what I was told prior to taking this stand, that I would be ostracized. But that is not what has happened. I have realized now that while yes, there are hecklers, and yes, there are people who comment on social media, the support that I've received tenfold anything negative, easily. The amount of people, the amount of parents, female athletes who reach out to me and say, thank you for doing what you're doing. You've given me the courage to address this issue, how it's impacting me right now at my school or what have you. That makes it all worth it. Again, 10 times out of 10. Also, again, like I said, knowing what I'm fighting for is true. That knowing it's such an easy subject matter to stand firm on from a worldly perspective, but again, from a biblical, eternal perspective. The outcome has already been made. The war has already been won, which is the most beautiful part of all this. We know how this turns out.
That's awesome. And I loved your response and how you handled the Keith Oberman situation. One of those individuals that I didn't even think he was relevant anymore, and he's not. But the way you handled it was absolutely brilliant. Riley, what started off as an issue with the NCAA has certainly pushed you to reaffirm your stance on God's design for gender and sexuality. What would your message be if the statistics are true that the millennial generation and Generation Z is dealing with gender confusion and gender dysphoria in record numbers? What would your message be to the next generation when it comes to embracing God's design for gender instead of wrestling against it? Why is God's design for gender the best way and the way that actually leads to peace and flourishing?
Well, again, because it was entirely intentional. He created each of us perfectly in his image, not just in his image, but perfectly the way that he designed for us to be. I have such a problem with the verbiage that we hear nowadays, even the verbiage of gender affirming care. It sounds positive. It sounds like, we use this word affirming in there. It sounds like this positive, healthy, normal thing. But think about the message that the verbiage gender affirming care sends to a minor or an adult for that matter. We are telling them that they are correct to believe that they were born in the wrong body. What a terrible, awful message to spread to anyone. Again, they do it they use words like love and compassion. That is not what love is. That is not what compassion is. We should be telling these kids, or adults for that matter, that they are perfect the way God created them to be. That's what we should be telling them. That's what a positive message actually looks like. And it breaks my heart for a lot of these, again, specifically minors here. Really, I think the gender ideology movement as a whole is built around deceit. A lot of the times, these people who identify as trans, they're victims too. They have fallen for the lie. And who's the father of lies? Who moves through deceit and in darkness and manipulation? God's opposition does. But when you're deceived, look, you don't know right from wrong because you don't know what right is. It's our job as Christians, as believers. That's why we're put on this planet, to teach people what is right. And that is certainly his word, his gospel, and his message that he created male and female uniquely, equally, right? We are created equally, but that does not mean that we are the same. We are different in a way that doesn't make one sex inferior to the other. No, women aren't inferior, but we were crafted in complement of each other. Again, and that's strategic on God's part, all a part of his unique design.
Amen. You are leading, as we talked about at the beginning of the program, leading the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute. It's very fortuitous that they found someone named Riley Gaines to lead the Riley Gaines Institute. Good work on their part. But you are advocating for these issues all over the country. We've talked a little bit about some of it today, but just give us an overview of the advocacy that you are engaged with today through the Riley Gaines Center.
Yes, a big push of mine at the Riley Gaines Center is to get on college campuses. We have seen in recent weeks just how many of these college campuses really are a hotbed for pushing progressive, radical, harmful ideologies. Of course, within the transgender gender ideology movement, but now we're seeing that really transcend into many cultural issues. But that's who needs to hear the message the most. What good does it do to preach to the choir all the time? So we are going on college campuses. Just the past 8 weeks, I've spoken at 25 different college campuses. Wow. It's been a heavy feat, but we are putting ourselves on the likes of Cal Berkeley, Harvard, Princeton, everything in between until the likes of Truett McConnell, which is a private Christian school in Georgia. So going where the message needs to be heard. That is a big push at the Riley Gaines Center. and something that, again, I see as necessary. And just highlighting the story of others. For example, we had a couple girls from West Virginia who are 13 years old reach out to the Riley Gaines Center a few weeks ago, basically saying, hey, we're competing against a boy at our middle school track and field championships. He throws shot put, does other events, discus, and they said, we don't want to compete against him. What do we do? And so was able to talk with them, guide them, console them. And ultimately, these girls came to the conclusion that they weren't going to throw. 5 of them, they got up in the circle in the ring. They had their shot put. They acted like they were going to throw, and they stepped out of protests of competing against this boy. And it was so powerful. The video got over 10 million views overnight. And I don't know if they realized how many other girls they inspired. Ultimately, now their coach has barred them from future competitions for taking the stand that they have, which is tragic. It's so sad to me. It's a sad, sad day when 13, 14-year-old girls have to be the adults in the room. But that's what these girls were. So we're doing work like that at the Riley Gaines Center. One more thing that we just recently did, any girl who concedes a match or a game or a competition where a boy is playing, I've said that I will pay them the prize money that they lose out on. So at the Riley Gaines Center, we just, there was a pool player, billiards, 8-ball, which admittedly I know nothing about. But there was a male playing. The girl in the finals, she decided, I'm not playing pool against this male. And she stepped back. And so we paid her all the prize money she lost out on.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Riley, we are just so behind you and what you're doing. I know you didn't ask for this platform, but God gave it to you, and you are stewarding it well. And when we think about college campuses, anybody that's been watching the news in the last few months realizes that that is ground zero in this cultural battle, and could not think of a better advocate, better spokesperson, better role model for the next generation than you. So God be with you as you continue this fight. You know it's a spiritual battle, and so we are praying for you, and thank God for your voice right now.
Well, you guys are the best. And like I said, I'm grateful for you, what you stand for, how you communicate your message. It's incredibly powerful. It is needed so desperately right now. So thank you, guys.
Likewise. Thank you, Riley.
Thank you, Riley. And that's all the time we have on the City of God podcast today. If you were inspired or encouraged, don't know how you couldn't be today. We pray that you would pass this episode with Riley Gaines along to a family member or a friend or anyone who wants to think biblically about what's happening in our culture right now. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the City of God. The City of God podcast is produced by Coral Ridge Ministries and made in partnership with the Institute for Faith and Culture. Visit us at cityofgodpodcast.com to access all of our previous episodes. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or anywhere you get podcasts. A full video version of this podcast is available on YouTube. This is the City of God podcast, where Christ meets culture.